Hello and welcome to our March 2019 Landlord and Real Estate Investor Q&A presentation. I'm Jim Clark and I'm an attorney. I represent landlords and active real estate investors. We've had a busy couple months over here. I had a few lectures that I gave to some of the local real estate investment organizations. I did one at the first annual New York Real Estate Investor Expo at the Marriott Marquis in the city. That talk was about negotiation. And then I did another talk at the East Coast Real Estate Investors Association on the legal landscape of residential landlording on Long Island. We had very good feedback on both lectures, and both of them were recorded. So we'll be putting them up on the channel in the coming weeks as part of our effort to bring you guys some more value. So if you haven't already, I'd highly recommend that you subscribe to this channel. That way you'll be notified as we start rolling this stuff out. Before we get started, I just need to mention that the material provided in this presentation is informational only and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. You should contact your attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular issue or problem. The use of and viewing of this presentation or any of the links contained don't create an attorney-client relationship. The opinions expressed in this presentation are my own and may not reflect the opinions of my firm or any individual attorney in my practice. Portions of this presentation may contain attorney advertising under the rules of some states, and prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. But if you need an attorney or think you might need an attorney, then by all means feel free to reach out to us. Our offices are in New York, and we're licensed to practice in New York, but we work with investors from all over the United States. And if we cannot help you, then we're happy to point you in the right direction. You can find us on the web at www.clarkslaws.com, or you can reach us using the contact information that you'll see throughout the presentation. So feel free to give us a call. I'm here in service to you guys, so by all means hit me up. And this presentation is free to you, but of course I encourage you to support it by subscribing and liking it so that we can keep doing what we do. So in the course of a month, I interact with many landlords and investors, and what I find is that the same questions come up over and over again. So I've been putting these short Q&A presentations together as a way of reaching more people who could benefit from the information. And if, as you're rolling along, you have any questions that you'd like to ask, then please get them to me using the contact information below or through my website at www.clarkslaws.com, and I'd be happy to consider it for a future Q&A presentation. I've been keeping these presentations to about 15 minutes, and I'll continue to try and do that. It's a short period of time to cover what is often a lot of information, so of course this isn't going to be as detailed as I would like, but as I mentioned, feel free to give us a call and we'd be happy to expand on any of this. So now, with all that out of the way and without further ado, I'll now run through our March 2019 Landlord and Real Estate Investor Q&A. First question is from Edgar. Mortgage brokers are a good source for deals. In a recent talk that you did, you mentioned that mortgage brokers are a good source for leads for real estate investors. Can you elaborate on that and tell me how it works and how you go about doing it? Well, sure. So mortgage brokers, as many of you guys know, they're in the business of getting people mortgages on their house. A lot of times people will call the mortgage broker when they're in trouble with their existing mortgage. If they're nearing foreclosure and they need to refinance, maybe the payments are not good for them. Things just aren't working for whatever reason, their current financial structure in their house. Not everybody, of course. A lot of people, they call their mortgage broker when they just want to do a refinance. But with the amount of leads mortgage brokers get just in doing their day-to-day business, it's just a natural consequence that they will get calls from homeowners that are in distress. Now, homeowners that are in distress, such as on the verge of foreclosure or something like that, that's who many of you guys are looking for, at least on the residential real estate investor side. people who invest in foreclosures and things like that. So having mortgage brokers in your network, letting them know that you buy these types of properties and can be a potential source of bailing these people out, could be a good thing to have, because you're going to then be the first one that they call, because mortgage brokers, if they can't help them, they still want to do good by their lead if they're any good, and then what they'll do is they'll refer them to you. And so that's why mortgage brokers can be a good source of leads. Now, the other thing is, how do you go about doing it? Well, the same way you go about getting someone in your network otherwise. Attend real estate networking events, contact mortgage brokers, take them out for a coffee, ask them how you can help them do better for their clients. Next question is from Rob. Start date for a new residential tenant. I have a new residential tenant starting in one of my apartment units on the 8th of this month. Should I make my lease term start on the 8th, the 15th, or something else? Well, good question. I see this a lot, and what I always recommend is that you have your lease start on the 1st of the month. Now, just because your lease starts on the 1st of the month doesn't mean that you can't let them in early or later. So if you have a tenant that's starting on the 8th of the month, let them move in on the 8th of the month. And then what you do is you have the lease start on the first full month thereafter. So they're starting on the 8th of this month. The lease term will start on the 1st of the next month. And what you'll do is you'll collect a per diem rent from them, which would encompass the 8th through the end of the month. And you put that in the lease, saying per diem rent is paid with the signing of this lease. And even though the lease term doesn't start till the 1st of the next month, the lease term still governed during this pre-lease term period. Now what this does is it kind of puts everything in alignment. Mortgage payments, things like that, they're due on the 1st. Many people pay their other bills on the 1st. So it makes sense to have rent be payable on the 1st as well. So that way it corresponds with everything else, the other bills that your tenants are going to be paying, the other bills that you're going to be paying. In addition to that, if for some reason the term of your lease expires sometime down the road and this tenant is still there, your lease is going to be governed somewhat by statute, and because the lease term is up. And if you have a lease term that ended on a 15th or an 8th, but the statute is kind of geared towards a lease term starting on the 1st, you're going to have a little disconnect in the way you give notices and things like that, and it could cause some confusion. And when you're terminating a tenancy, confusion does not work in a landlord's favor. So this gives you clarity, gives you alignment, and it kind of just makes it easier to run a business that way. So that's what I would recommend, is have the lease term start on the 1st and just collect a per diem rent for the time up to the 1st. Next question from Jessica. Kitchentable contracts. What is the best way to make offers on residential foreclosures that I intend to assign? Can I use a form contract and just have the seller sign it up without a lawyer? Yeah, we call these kitchentable contracts because the way they work is an investor would go to a homeowner's house with a contract, and if they want to do the deal, they actually have them sign it up at the kitchen table. And it's very problematic. I mean, from your perspective, I know it's something that's appealing because you can get the deal, lock it up right away, keep other investors from getting it. But there's problems. If the house is in foreclosure or near foreclosure, there's going to be Home Equity Theft Prevention Act problems, which will create a slew of issues for you going forward if it's not done absolutely correctly, including the homeowner can possibly rescind the contract, possibly rescind it even after it's closed. There's civil penalties and possibly even criminal penalties with some of this stuff. It's also, you're going to have the risk of buyer's remorse, or in this case, seller's remorse, if they don't fully think through the terms of the contract, if they don't have somebody knowledgeable advising them on it, and then they find out really it's not that great for them, and that will also create problems for you. Also, if you're doing this as opposed to having attorneys do the contracts for you, which is what I recommend, you may not get the terms quite right, because as an investor, what you should be focusing on is getting more deals, negotiating more deals, networking. The contract part, that's what attorneys are there for. Most likely they can do it better than you and less expensively, because your time is valuable, and that valuable time is best spent getting more deals. So if you're there and you don't get the terms quite right, we had this happen just recently where a client came to us with a kitchen table contract, and they didn't have a correct violations provision in the contract, which is a very important term. Turned out that this client is signing this contract for kind of a small amount of money, and at closing, or right before closing, on the title there appeared all kinds of violations that it's going to take probably about $5,000 to clear. This particular investor who's signing this contract is really not making much more than that, if it was a clean deal. But with this violation out there, the seller is claiming I don't have any responsibility for it. His end buyer is claiming I don't have any responsibility for it. It's not defined in the contract. So the middleman, our client, who's going to sign this contract and did a kitchen table contract, is going to have to shell out for that. And what was going to be a meager assignment fee to begin with is now going to be next to nothing. So this stuff does have consequences, and that's, there's people there that can help you. It's best to utilize them. Next question's from Dan. Best medium for negotiation. Do you find it better to negotiate in person or by phone? Well, that depends. Different negotiations require different means and different mediums. Sometimes we negotiate even by email. It depends on the situation. I find it okay to negotiate by phone. I don't see a problem with it. Depends on if you're trying to get the deal done or not. If you're trying to, the dynamics between the two parties negotiating. A lot of times in a face-to-face negotiation, it takes an investment of your time, because you have to travel to wherever you're going to negotiate, and you're going to have a meeting. There's going to be a sit-down. If you're looking to get a good deal, a lot of times what I say is, he who wants least wins. So, there's a lot of truth in that. And basically, if you seem too anxious and you're making this trip to go to this negotiation, it might not work out as good for you. Whereas if by phone, you can kind of feign disinterest, which could help you. It also helps in, the way you can have like a pause in your conversation and just let it sit. And you might be able to withstand an awkward pause, which will cause the other side to utter something they don't want to. It might be easier for you over the phone than in person. So it depends on the situation, but I wouldn't discount it completely and say, oh, it's no good to negotiate by phone. It has to be in person. Depends on the situation. Look at those situations, and you do what's best for you. Next question. Deal terms seem too onerous. I have a deal that requires a 10% deposit with no contingencies other than title. I'm unsure if my hard money lender will loan on the deal, and if they don't lend on it, then I don't want to do the deal. Any suggestions? Well, what I would suggest is that you try to work in a financing contingency. If they don't agree to that, then try to work in a due diligence contingency. If they don't agree to that, then perhaps try to negotiate the deposit down, because losing 10% of the purchase price, that could be a big hit. If they don't agree to that, well, yeah, that's an onerous contract, and you might want to consider not doing it if you can't get 100% comfortable that you're going to have the financing in place. It's very tough to find a deal. I'm aware of that. I've been through it myself, but it can take a long time to recover from a loss like that. And you're better off not losing. Moving on, going to another deal where you're not going to lose. than to risk that kind of money. That's what I would suggest. So with that, looks like we're running short on time. We're actually going a little over. So to wrap up, I just want to reiterate that if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please get them to me using the contact information below or through my website at www.clarkslaws.com, and I'd be happy to consider it for a future presentation. If you have any feedback on how we can make this presentation better, feel free to use the comment section below or reach out to us. And if you like this presentation, then you can help keep it going by liking to show your support or subscribing so that you'll be notified when new content is posted, and so that we can keep doing what we do and stand in service to you. So that's all we have for this time around. I'm Jim Clark. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.